right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. Are we live on that net of the internet thing? Hello, Mrs. Dratkin. We've been talking for several weeks now about, several years, several decades now about the same thing over and over and over again. Sometimes I feel like a parrot. And interestingly enough, or not, talking about stuff is fun and can be illuminating and illustrative and informative and even inspirational, but it is only talking about something. It's not the something itself. But we access the something itself through alignment of our energy, our energies, alignment of heart, mind, and will. When those three things come into alignment is when the magic happens. We talk a lot in here about being aware of the thoughts and feelings that have dominion in our lives, because they truly do. Thoughts and feelings create neural pathways and neurochemical addictions that crystallize and deepen over time until they become our personality. And free will is a concept we cannot truly access. But today I want to talk a little bit about the other side of the coin. You know, religious science is that if you get your thoughts right, and you get your emotions right, then you can have the life of your dreams. And that's true, to a point. Let's assume for a moment that you had all of the power and potential that is programmed into your DNA, that is programmed into you as a human spirit, come to move in the flesh. Let's assume for a moment you were king or queen of the world. You had the entire material reality at your fingertips and could create in this moment a world that looked exactly like you wanted it to look. Go ahead, just do that exercise. Let's just take a deep breath. Put your eyes closed if that helps, and just say, okay, just for a moment. The janitor gives us the mop and bucket and says, okay, you're God for today. What would you create? What would you change? What would you eliminate? What would you give birth to? And also keep one eye on the feelings that you have when you imagine these things. So, is that for anyone? Once you get past, world peace, everybody gets fed, everybody's healthy, no one's cruel, then what? And that's always the question about creativity. We talk a lot about how to become a conscious creator. But even when we fully develop the capacity to create consciously, we're still left in a world that we don't have complete information about. So how can we create consciously and be proactive and progressive and benign in a situation where we don't know all the players, all the vectors of force, and all of the energies that are swirling in this multiverse in which we exist? And of course that brings to mind the ancient story that we've told in here many times about the long ago and far away, the farmer that had a farm, and he had a couple of pigs, and he had some chickens, and he had a garden, and he had a horse. And the horse was the main engine of. The horse got filled with spirit, kicked the fence down, and galloped off toward the horizon. In the morning, the farmer got up, saw the damage to the paddock, to the fence, and realized his horse was gone. His neighbor wandered over about that time and said, "Oh, looks like you lost your horse. What an awful thing." And the farmer said, "Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing." The next day, the horse returns with a whole herd of mares trailing behind him. They come into the paddock willingly. Farmer fixes the fence. The neighbor comes over and says, "Well, look at this. Your horse returned and brought back all these mares. What great fortune." The farmer said, "Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing." A couple of days later, as the farmer's son, his only son, was in the paddock breaking one of the mares, she bucked him off, and he fell to the ground awkwardly and broke his leg. The neighbor wandered over, saw what had happened, and said to the farmer, "What an awful thing, you've lost your only hand on the farm." The farmer said, "Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing." The next day, or actually about a week later, news traveled slow in those days, the word came through that the country was at war, and sure enough, the day after that, the army marched through, conscripting young men to go off to the war. But the farmer's son, of course, was spared because his leg was badly broken. Was that a good thing or a bad thing? We don't know. Fireman risks his life to enter a burning building to save a baby. Who would argue that what a wonderful act of heroism this was, and just how wonderful an exhibition of the best of humanity that was? But in one particular parallel universe, that baby grows up and marries and has a family, and one of those children turns into a mass murderer. So was the fireman's act a good thing or a bad thing? We don't know. We don't have sufficient information. We live in come on, Christine. We live in a world that worships the prefrontal cortex, that worships our ability to assemble information, analyze that information, sync it up with what we already know, and use that to create safety, to create prosperity, to create the things that we want to create in the world. But to do that, we have to make judgments about what has value. And those judgments are based on very little information. It's like being asked to assess the value of a painting that's masked off except for the couple of inches in the lower right-hand corner of the painting. I don't know. Could be a good painting, could be a bad painting, because we can only see a little bit of it. this is true in life. We never really know, no matter how much information we think we have, no matter how much intelligence, processing power, analytical capacity we have, we never really know what tomorrow is going to look like. We have a pretty good idea because we know what yesterday looked like, and we project. And in many ways, we do create the flavor of tomorrow based on what we think we know about yesterday. But we're ambling about in the dark in many cases. So, along with the capacity to create consciously, the first step in that process, obviously, is to stop creating the things, the thoughts, the feelings, the addictions, the memes, the habits, the patterns that create suffering in the world. Mostly in myself. But also I see, if I look analytically, I can see some suffering that's caused by my thoughts, feelings, words, actions, collateral damage. So the first step in awakening, becoming conscious of what I'm creating, is to stop creating those things that are on their face, not in alignment with my highest knowing and desire. But then what? Once I stop creating the things that are creating suffering, then what do I create? For many centuries, when human consciousness was still rather in its infancy, or its, let's say, its adolescence, we developed great religions. And these religions got great traction around the globe. The Abrahamic religions, the Eastern religions, the indigenous religions. There's almost nowhere on the globe you could go 500 years ago and not walk into a world where there was a religious construct that defined the activities in that world. Why was that? What was the value of that? Well, it was a socializing force, but it was also, it came out of the instinctive human understanding of how in many ways puny we felt in a great, large, unknowable, dangerous world. And so we subscribed to a surrendering of the need to be in control to a higher power. In all religions, they described, not all religions, but most of the religions describe some being very human-like in its form, or in some cases multiple beings, somewhat human-like in their form, that were running the show. And so we could go, I don't have to be so concerned about everything I say, do, and think, because God will take care of it. And that's how these religions served us, because they taught us devotion and surrender. Now, we can argue all day about the validity of the stories those religions told in terms of the nature of God, the nature of the universe, but we can't argue with the fact that learning devotion and surrender have great value. Embodying that has great value to humans. And I know that all of you, or most of you, have had moments of devotion and surrender in your life and know what that feels like. Know how empowering and relieving it is at the same time. So, what's going on here? It's appreciation of the great miracle of our lives. If you go back a million years and you take a look at the state of cellular life and flora and fauna on this planet, and you would have said slightly less than a million years from now, there's going out of this biological morass is going to develop a species that can self-evaluate, predict, and plan and in some level control their environment. What would the Vegas odds have been on that actually happening? It would have been astronomical. And so, as we begin to appreciate fully the sophistication and the nature of our human experience, it's truly awesome to consider all that, not just what we know, because the information base is now doubling, I don't know, every 30 days or something ridiculous like that. The stuff that we know is staggering. But the more we know, the more we come into the realization of just how much there is that we don't know. That's not categorized. That's not scientifically defined. Because we are not humans that have consciousness. We are consciousness that becomes human. So our humanity, our being, this thing with my name on it, my personality and my story and my physical characteristics and even my emotional life and even my thoughts come from a place of mystery. All of that is only a tiny fraction of who I really am. My entire self encompasses way more than even what I'm conscious of. Energy is all we are aware of in this universe. It manifests as in different ways, but we're only scientifically aware of energy. But we're dimly aware, at least, of more than the kinds of energy that we can measure with scientific instruments. And that's the awareness and the consciousness that we are. And then, at some point, it becomes obvious that even beyond my awareness and my consciousness, there's more that I cannot see and cannot taste and cannot even dimly sense. Once we understand how miraculous our lives are, and if you think about 80 trillion cells working in concert, the systems that have developed to sustain and support and reproduce life on this, when you think of biology itself as a fairly recent experiment that exists as a thin film on maybe a handful of planets, just the notion of biology is an incredible miracle. Some would say evolutionary experiment. Call it what you like. It's still rare as can be, and we have a rich experience of it from the inside out here as humans. That's incredibly miraculous. If you take and gash your arm and watch over the next few weeks what happens to that gash and how it heals, that's mind-boggling. If you think about all of the adaptations that the body and the organ systems and the cells have to make in order for that to happen, and for it to have the information to make that happen in a relatively short time, you start to go scratch your head and go, this is beyond the ability of any species to design and create. And who designed and created that? I mean, we've learned to manipulate it. We've learned to use it. We've learned that there are laws in the universe, that physical things have certain laws that they have to follow. There's a certain cause and effect predictability to the physical universe, which is amazing. And then you go to the subatomic universe and you see all bets are off. There are laws that govern that too, but they're completely different. And some of them we're only dimly aware of. We can impact the way a particle, the way a photon represents itself either as a particle or as a wave by our mere act of observation or non-observation. If a human being is observing its particle, if we set up a photographic plate to observe it, it becomes a wave. The interjection of human consciousness shifts the nature and state of that photon, which is light, which is Einstein said is the most important thing in the universe. Bhakti yoga is the yoga of devotion. And if you've ever been in a situation where it be Allah, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, or the, Akhenaten, Moctezuma, the unspoken I am, where you actually offer your life in service to that which knows, to the good in the universe, to that which is truly the sum total of all consciousness. If you've ever been in that situation, you know what I'm talking about. The transformative nature of devotion. Now, some of us have been burnt by that, so I can see already your jaw's starting to tighten, your sphincter's starting to tighten, because we're talking about giving up something of myself to another, and when we do that, we're asking to be burnt, because we've all been burnt. And why do we get burnt? Because we give it to another human being. Human beings are imperfect. Like I said, we don't even know enough to make rational decisions, so how can you trust a human being to handle your heart with care? And we give it to religious symbols, and then something about the trappings of that religious symbol feels like betrayal to us, and we get burnt again. So what I'm calling attention to at this point is a devotion to something more magnificent than my human awareness, than my sense of self, certainly more magnificent than my physical presence, my personality, my presentation in the world. Certainly more magnificent than what I think I understand about the world and about humanity and about the nature of life and existence and being. What would that thing look like? And we've been given all these images, from little babies to gray-haired old men to even images of, goddesses rising from the sea with scepters, and elephant gods, and Ant-Man, and just 1,000 different ways of trying to represent that which is inconceivable. And what I'm talking about is the fact that we understand that we are each a droplet in the ocean of consciousness. And what I'm talking about is a surrender not to anything unlike you. It's actually a surrender to yourself. Because you, as the drop of water, are surrendering to the wisdom of the sea. Surrendering to the wisdom of the ocean. Surrendering as a unique consciousness, a unique awareness, surrendering to the all of consciousness, the all of awareness. Because that entity, the all, the Atman, has enough information to make good decisions, to say, this is the way to go, this is not the way to go. That consciousness has that capacity. And we know this because when we are able to completely subdue the addictions of the mind, brain, body alliance, when we're able to surrender those addictions to the higher will of consciousness, of I am, of that which is the universe, that which has created the universe and continues to create the universe consciously, when we surrender to that, we instantly get a neurochemical reward. It's called bliss. It's a profound drug. Profound. It is the sense of total rightness. Everything in the universe is exactly as it should be. This moment is perfect. The next moment is looked upon with perhaps some anticipation because it's just going to be another moment of this perfection. Or maybe you don't even need to look forward to the next moment because this perfection is sufficient unto itself. And there are those that would say, yeah, that's all well and good, but that's just another drug. That's just another escape. That's just another form of self-medication. It can be, but not at its essence, not at its core, not when it's truly engaged, when the personality is truly not destroyed, but placed in a position of subservience to that which knows. And not a groveling subservience, an honoring, grateful subservience to that which knows. When I have my breakfast in the morning, I start by blessing the food and the hands that brought it to me. And then I start with my organ systems, and then my awareness, and then life itself, offering gratitude for all of these things. By the time I'm ready to eat that breakfast, I'm in a state of bliss. So my digestion is going to work pretty well. Rather than reading the Wall Street Journal while I eat and kvetching over what's going to happen to the world today that's worse than what happened to it yesterday. My digestion is not going to work well in that situation. So this has practical applications, but it's way, and the practical applications go as far as you can imagine, because as we become more competent in our ability to, in the moment, understand the kinds of energy signature, thinking, feeling, being that we need to come into alignment with to create consciously, it is also essential, in order so that we do no harm, to come into an alliance, a communion with that great heart of the universe, the heart and mind of the universe that knows exactly what is appropriate action or inaction, thought, speech, being in each moment. And it is in that communion that we become royal, that we become dynamic, that we become holy in our being. And when we reach that point, we become so radiant that all of our experience begins to take on that nature of holy radiance. So it's a combination of awareness, consciousness, conscious creation, and surrender, gratitude and devotion that makes us the whole image of God human that we were designed and continue to be recreated to be. And when one of us reaches that state, when one of us in the room gets to that state, guess what happens to the rest of us? Yeah, we're all connected. There's entanglement here. There's quantum entanglement. So when one of us progresses, when one of us has a moment of breakthrough, when one of us finds a way to achieve that fully awake, conscious, but blissful state of awakened surrender, the magic show, the curtain comes back from the magic show, and we recognize this is not magic, this is the nature of truth, the nature of reality. And our world is transformed. So, along with our work of becoming more conscious about the things we don't want to create and we don't want to sustain, let us also develop a practice of surrender and gratitude so that we can replace those things with truly divine intention. And good night, Mrs. Drapkin, wherever you are.